Women who gave the creep a chance. How did it go? We had a terrible date. I wanted to cancel beforehand, but felt guilty doing it. He texted a lot after. I told him straight that I did not feel the same way about him, and wait for it. He took it well. He thanked me for being straight with him and for giving him a chance. I hope he found someone. The creepy behavior was mostly before the date. I was working a temporary bartending position while the usual bartender, a friend, was on unpaid maternity leave. It was a small hole-in-the-wall type neighborhood bar. In addition to off-putting or creepy jokes and comments, there was also an incident where he offered to wait to walk me to my car and I declined. I still found him hiding in the shadows waiting for me as I walked out. He almost learned what a stun gun feels like that evening. He claimed he was just worried about me because he saw some sketchy people outside when he left. Do I know that's what it was for sure? No. I definitely questioned his motives, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I asked my friend what his deal was, and he said he fell into the creepy but harmless category. After talking with him over the few weeks I was at that job, I took him as someone who had very poor social skills, but not a bad person. I think the creepy vibe came from the lack of social skills. He needed a lesson in not trying to act cool or tough with his comments or jokes because it contributed to the creep for sure. I accepted the date on my last shift at that bar, figuring that if it went really badly, I didn't know where I usually work, and I made sure to drive myself there and had people on standby should I need help. Social skills are required, and some people have a hard time acquiring them, especially if they're in the spectrum. So, verbally saying stuff to them can really help a lot. Story 2. Met him when I worked as a cashier in a small downtown shop. Wasn't my type and seemed a little off, but I was young and had zero real dating experience. I agreed to grab coffee as a friend and made it clear I didn't have a romantic interest. He became convinced he was Gatsby and I was his Daisy. The Great Gatsby film had just come out that year. Started stalking me and endlessly sending letters and gifts to me at work, describing how we were fated to be together. When I confronted him to stop, he started having his friends follow me at work or drop by to check in on me. Prowled outside of nights, I had to close shop alone. I ended up quitting that job and things fizzled. 7 months later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was the same dude. He just got released from a short prison sentence and was letting me know he thought of me every day and was going to find me so we could finally be together. I made up a story that I was traveling abroad for college and would be gone indefinitely. Changed my number and luckily haven't heard from him again. Maybe he was the real-life Gatsby. Story 3. I'll give a rare success story. Not with me, but it's not as bad as the others. He was sort of creepy and weird and neckbeardy. We hung out and sort of flirted because I didn't want to be seen as shallow and didn't know how to hold boundaries, but I wasn't really interested. I eventually just sort of stopped giving him attention and giving off signals. Apparently, he made a couple snide comments to people we both knew about how I don't date monomuggles, monogamous people, anyway, which is a schmuck thing to say. A few years later, I saw him at a con and he waved me down and I was nervous, but he was like, "Hey, I wanted to apologize. I was a real prick to you, dear friends. I've done a lot of work on myself and realized that women not liking me isn't a them problem, it's a me problem." I forgave him and we hung out a couple times after that at cons since good guy. Just had been going through a cringy phase. We all have those, honestly. Story 4. This guy was handsome but way too into me for knowing nothing about me. It wasn't like when we spoke I was an open book or felt a strong connection that would lead me to want to share info with him. This was not I feel like I've known this man forever connection. I just thought this was normal dating but had a gut feeling something was off. He talked to me like I'd been his girlfriend for months. We went on 3 dates, never even had intimacy. After the 3rd date, I had my decision based on our short time getting to know one another and let him know I had no interest in continuing to date and that I didn't see us being compatible long term. He then locked me in his car, proceeded to ask if I wanted to move to California with him and started crying or begging me to work this out. I tried to be very nice, but it got to the point I was scared and wasn't sure how this was going to go since he was virtually a stranger. So I hit his dashboard and said if he didn't let me out of the car immediately, I was calling the police. Then he threatened to end himself if I didn't spend the night with him at his house. I'd never even been to this man's house. He finally let me out after like an hour or two, but stayed in the parking lot of my apartment almost the entire night and called me nonstop. About a month later, he texted me out of the blue a really long paragraph, apologizing profusely and saying if I ever changed my mind to call him. I just said thanks for the apology and wished him well. Hope he's doing okay, but I wanted no part of that. Some men just have a cringy phase, but there are some men who are beyond saving. Story 5. On our first date, I ordered a beer. It came to the table super frothy. I was distracted for a moment, but when I looked at it again, there were very clear drip marks in the foam, like something had been dropped in it. I made up some excuse about not feeling well and got out of there. Oops, can't leave. My stupid self drove and my car was valeted. I very uncomfortably got the car from the valet and we both got in. He asked me to stop at a gas station so he could buy smokes on the way. Thank God, because I knew going to his house was not a good idea. As soon as he got out at the station, I peeled out and left him there. I never should have let him in my car, but I panicked. I didn't know what he was capable of. This was 15 plus years ago. I'm now happily married to the best thing that ever happened to me. Story 6. Back in high school, several of my female friends and I, also female, had an off period before lunch, so we were all sitting around a table chatting. One of the female security guards came up to us and told me that there was a new exchange student from Amsterdam that thought I was cute, but he was too nervous to come over and introduce himself. I have zero interest in men, but I figured there wasn't any harm in letting the guy come sit with us and helping him feel more comfortable at our school. So he comes over, sits down with us, and chats a bit. He seemed rather shy, and he had about a dozen piercings going up each arm that he kept fiddling with, and a bunch of facial piercings. Then class lets out and people, including a bunch of my male friends, start showing up for lunch. First male friend sits down and introduces himself. New guy does not respond at all. Doesn't even look at friend. Weird. Maybe just shy. Second male friend comes and sits down. Same thing. Slightly unsettling now. I kept trying to include him over lunch, but he would only respond to the women. Wouldn't even acknowledge the other guys at the table. I never talked to him again after the lunch period, and 2 weeks later he got expelled for slamming a girl against a locker and hurting her to the point she nearly passed out. Well, I guess you dodged a great bullet there. Story 7. The dude in the flat across from mine started off as a really nice guy. Introduced himself, offered meals when he'd cook too much. Just a great guy all around. But then in a few weeks, it was made clear that he was an alcoholic. I have a recovering brother, so I really sympathized with him. I went out of my way to sit with him and eventually called him an ambulance when he recovered from withdrawals. UK, so calling an ambulance is free. This carried on for a little while, with me sitting with him 2 or 3 times a week, waiting for an ambulance. One night after he started fitting, he kept grabbing me. I was already on the phone to the ambulance service, but the woman heard me telling him to stop and sent the police as well. He was carted off, and just like usual, I grabbed his keys and told him to knock for them the next morning. Well, the next time I looked after him, it got worse. And then slowly, so did my life. Suddenly, I had fires set outside my windows and rats left on my doorstep. The police were called after every incident, and I got to know one policeman who was put on my case really well. He suggested I put up cameras, so I did. There was footage of the neighbor standing outside in the yard at 3 a.m., just staring into my window multiple nights in a row. Terrifying, but not illegal. Well, 2 weeks after that, my neighbor snapped. There were builders in the garden next to ours, and they apparently woke him up at 4 p.m. He ran out with a kitchen knife and harmed 2 of the builders and the neighbor's dog. Everyone survived. He also slashed a whole bunch of tires in our street. When the police came to search the dude's flat, my policeman friend told me, off the books, that the neighbor had been faking being an alcoholic the entire time. He'd get in the ambulance, ride to the hospital, and check himself out and walk home. Also, they found half a dozen rats in his bathtub. You'd think him being arrested would be the end of it, but no. They put my name, picture, address, and telephone number in a street working site. I had men aggressively hounding me multiple times an hour for 2 entire weeks before I just cut all ties and fled the city. Last I heard, he was in jail for the GBH, but that was a few years ago now. Yeah, never gonna make the same mistake again. That was a lot. Story 8. A few years ago, I went to a brewery to meet a guy on a date for the first time. The waiter began a conversation and asked me if I was expecting anyone else. I told him I was on a blind date and hadn't met the guy before. The waiter asked me if I wanted to set up a code word. Since they didn't serve milk stouts, if I ordered one from him, he would know something is up and would call me back to have me sign the receipt instead. The waiter kept checking on me frequently. Eventually, I did order a milk stout. When it came time for the bill, I asked for it to be split. The date put his drinks on my bill. When the waiter came back, he told me he had the drinks removed. It was on the house. When my date asked me what that was all about, I told him the waiter had told me there was something wrong with my card, so I needed to go to the bar with him. I waited a while and then left for my car. The date was still there. He made a comment about how he was waiting for a goodbye hug. I told him no thank you and that my car was in the opposite direction. Moments later, he sent me horrendous text messages. And thank you, John. You may have saved my life that day. Thank you, John, we all say in unison. Story 9. I used to work in a small store and this creepy dude would try to flirt with me. I guess it was flirting. Like once or twice a week. He seemed like someone who didn't have any friends and never socialized, but one day he asked for my number and it wasn't aggressive, but pretty straightforward, so I was like, sure, I guess. Thought he was weird, but he knew where I worked, so I couldn't really reject him because there was no way of knowing how he would react. I had to keep talking to him from time to time to make sure he didn't flip crap on me since I worked the night. After a few weeks of occasional short text convos, like maybe 2 or 3 few-word texts, He asked how old I was, and he finally stopped talking to me because he was disgusted that I was 24 years old. He thought I was only 16. He was 28. He was a kiddie. She told me she was 12! Story 10. Went on a first date for just drinks with a guy, and red flags were immediate. Didn't look anything like his profile and got handsy almost as soon as we sat down. I wasn't into him at all, but we had a shared interest in horror novels, so I decided to extend the date into dinner. During dinner, he drank several old fashions while I nursed a single beer. He then told me he thought we were soulmates and he thought we were going to fall in love. He also told me his ex-girlfriend was going to get a termination the next day. At the end of the date, his portion of the bill was significantly more than my portion because of all his drinks, but he asked me to pay half, which I did. On top of that, he gave me crap for driving to the date, even though it was only a mile from my house. I didn't want to walk in hot weather in my nice date dress, and I had twisted my ankle earlier that week. But even after giving me crap for driving, he asked me to give him a lift home, which I did. Once we were in front of his place, he refused to get out of my car unless I went inside with him for a nightcap. I said absolutely not. He begged me to just enjoy a drink on his front porch. I said no. I told him to get out of my car. He finally did. The next day, he texted me telling me that it was the best date he'd ever had and he couldn't wait to see me again. I told him no thank you and walked away with one lesson learned. I need to just say no from the beginning. Story 11. He had terrible hygiene. I was 16. He was old enough to buy beer for my friends. He had a friend who had some sort of made-up gang who threatened me if I ever left him. I stayed with him longer than I should have. He would follow me to school on the city bus and then walk around leering at women. I tried to break up with him and he bought me Looney Tunes jewelry and insisted we were engaged. He finally had to go out of town for some family stuff and stayed gone for months, so I considered us broken up and I moved on. When he came back, he acted crazy. He would go to my job and follow me around and try to corner me in the bathroom. His dad was the chief of police at a university and knew I was 16. My parents also knew about the relationship. I feel like some parents should have intervened to keep me from feeling trapped in that relationship. Jesus. Both parents. What the heck? Story 12. I had a friend in high school. It was the kid teachers were extra nice to, just in case, if you know what I mean. They were messaging, and he basically said he was intoxicated and was going to end himself if I didn't agree to date him. I was 17 and scared, so I said yes. It was alright, and I had pretty low self-esteem. We dated for 2 years, and they were miserable. He convinced me that I was wrong for saying I was pure because I'd been mistreated and all sorts of other crap. He had no emotional intelligence at all. He would openly flirt with my friend around me and say that if we broke up, he didn't want to have to be single again, so I wanted to set up other options, and besides, she was skinny and I wasn't. Eventually, I went to college and made real friends, and we just kinda ghosted each other. It was weird. Story 13. I ignored my gut feeling about him, overlooked his strange tendencies, and tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. We were together for almost 2 years. The entire relationship, he added girls he didn't even know on Snapchat and would say rather inappropriate things to them. Being that you know nothing about strangers on that app, I'm now aware that one of the girls was a minor. He was 26. On my 22nd birthday, he had invited my best friend to sleep in our bed with us, and the first time he met my sister, he gave her the same invitation. He gave both of those invitations right in front of my face. When we were out together and he saw someone attractive, he wouldn't just glance. He stared. He regularly talked crap to my family and is just generally an awful person. I was his first real girlfriend, and he was and is extremely self-centered and mentally cruel. That ended almost a year ago, and he still goes to our regular hangouts and asks about me when I come in, where I'm living, who I'm seeing, etc. My takeaway from that whole situation is always trust your gut feeling about people. Story 14. Creepy guy in high school asked me out, and my friend said to give him a chance. We played World of Warcraft together. I had a weird feeling about him, but hey, maybe he's just kind of socially awkward. After one insanely awkward movie night at his place, he started getting really intimate. Arms around my shoulders and then grabbing me really hard. I told him I wasn't interested in sleeping with a guy on the first date, and he started screaming and insulting me and threw his glasses at the wall. I ended up letting do it just so he would calm down and not get violent. Walked home and blocked him on everything. In my friend's defense, he didn't know that this guy was insane, and he did feel really guilty over it. I obviously don't blame him for trying to set up a date for someone who he had only had positive interactions with. You let him what? Story 15. I was in high school, my senior year, and I thought to befriend this weird kid at lunch. He was your textbook greasy outcast with a leather jacket and headphones on, way too loud. He was an offbeat art kid, but generally well-liked and surprisingly well-remembered even after almost 20 years post-graduation. My friends ran the gamut of high school social classes, so they gave this dude a chance because I gave him a chance. My friends were not forgiving and quickly turned into just how creepy he could be. They soon stopped entertaining him and split off to a different table. I tried to balance time between him and the larger group, but as the year progressed, I became more enmeshed with the larger group, as our final classes and assignments overlapped a great deal. Many of us were in the same AP and extracurricular activities. I tried to keep up chatting with him in the hallways, but he either wouldn't really respond or was short with me. I figured he was hurt over lunch, not working out anymore, so I gave him space. He did not take it well. I was at my locker one day, swapping things out for the back half of the day, when he stormed up. He had a glass bottle of Coca-Cola with him. I remember it because he liked to chew tobacco and spit it into the same bottle he would drink from. I'd asked about it once, and he said, "What does it matter? It's all going in the same place," and took a swig. He had that glass bottle in his hand, and he looked livid. He saw me. He chucked the bottle in my direction and exploded on the floor. He started screaming at me about how awful I was and how I was a betrayer and stuck up like all my perfect friends. He got right up in my face, and I just felt like shrinking into the floor. He banged in the lockers, making them rattle. The track coach had been down the hall and jogged over to interrupt. This guy said I'd better watch my back and stormed off. I spent the rest of senior year feeling paranoid. I would see him in the hall and would go to a different direction to get to class instead. I vaguely remember seeing him at graduation, but haven't seen him since. I live in the same greater metro area. I don't give creepy dudes chances anymore. Once was enough. Story 16. I got bad vibes from a guy. On our second date, I had to cancel because my dog was sick and had to go to the vet. I told him I was sorry. He asked to meet me at the vet. I told him no, but we could reschedule because I was really stressed out. He showed up anyway, which was really weird, but I didn't think much of it, even though I hadn't told him which vet it was. But I was so focused on my dog, I didn't really register it beyond a fleeting thought. I didn't want him there, but he was, and he tried to be supportive, but I was panicking, and I barely knew him, and it was weird. I kind of ghosted him after because of the vibes. I don't like to ghost, but he sketched me out, and guys like that don't always take overt rejection well. A short while later, he asked to go on another date. I told him no thanks and that I wasn't interested. He said he was coming over to my house. He'd picked me up for a first date. I know. I told him I had moved, which was true. He said he was coming anyway. I was like, what the heck? No. How? I told him it was scaring me and not to bother. A few minutes later, I got a picture of my car, and my house, and my window. He had found my new house. Apparently, Snapchat had a feature where it just show people your exact location. He was just watching my movements over town. What an awful feature from an equally awful app. I told him that was weird and scary and I slept with a knife for weeks. Screw Snapchat. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 17. We worked together. I wasn't super into him, but decided to give him a chance because it's not like I was dating anyone else. In fact, I had a bit of a crush on another coworker that was in a somewhat supervisor role over me. So I thought better to move on from that. We had one date. We met, chatted, and walked, hugged at the end. Didn't even kiss. We had agreed to keep it between us because I didn't want work drama. His response to that was to tell most of our coworkers and to write me a letter he left in my car telling me how he could see the whole picture with me. Marriage, kids, growing old together. But hey, I can say one good thing. One of the people he told was that guy I mentioned earlier in this post that I had a crush on. Turns out it wasn't one-sided, and he made sure to step up and let me know it. I guess I shouldn't call him my crush anymore since he's my husband now. Ghosted the creep, and good thing I did. He tried this with every other woman in the store, too. Is this what they call mission failed successfully? Story 18. I agreed to go on a date with a guy. He seemed nice enough, and he appeared to have his crap together. After an hour at the pub, I was getting some red flags, and I said I needed to make a move, and he walked me to my car. He then got in my car with me and begged me to go back to his. I politely declined at first, but he wasn't getting out, so I started to get more scared. After about 20 minutes of insisting I come back to him, I was terrified. So I secretly texted my maid to call me with an emergency. 5 seconds later, she called and said she got stuck in a puddle and needed my help. I love this girl. I told him I really needed to go, and after getting quite angry, he finally got out and slammed my car door. Unfortunately, I went on another date a year later with a different guy, and again, he got in my car and tried to kiss me. I just slammed on my horn, wound my windows down, and screamed like a crazy person. Luckily, he got the message and left swiftly. Guys, please don't just get in the girl's car. It's creepy and scary as heck. Yeah, what the hell, guys? Story 19. I gave 2 creeps a chance. I used to have this thing where I had to find out if they were really that bad. So I dated this girl and she had a crap reputation. It was like that good girl dates bad boy trope. Turns out she had mistreated 2 of my friends, and I didn't find out about that fact until very recently. Then I moved on to this guy who was also known to be very creepy with women. But we were in middle school, so I was like, how bad could it be? He mistreated my best friend. Both of them get the bad karma they deserve. Story 20. There was a guy who I wasn't sure about. There had been signs. After a couple normal dates, he wanted to take my Jeep to a local off-road location that had a main rutty road with many offshoots with hill climbs and mud pits. He bugged and bugged me to drive it. I told him he could only take it down the main off-road, but while we were bouncing, straddling ruts, chugging along just fine, he suddenly gunned it up an almost vertical climb off the main road and rolled us into a ditch on our side. The tires weren't on the ground, so there was no way to get it out. Then he acted like it was no big deal. I had to walk to my uncle's house, which happened to be on a road near the off-road location. I wasn't home, but his girlfriend was, so I called a couple people and couldn't get a hold of anyone. As a last resort, I called one of my best friends from childhood, a guy friend, which we did briefly date for a while before deciding to just remain friends. The only person I could get a hold of with a vehicle that could potentially pull my Jeep out. The creepy guy had no ideas besides leaving it there on its side. He had a total fit and made a big scene. My friend from childhood helped me pull the dents out and fix it while the creepy guy walked off into the sunset. Story 21. I was going through a messy divorce, mostly because my ex-husband had drained my bank account, second time, and still had all the bills of our apartment and insurance. He kept the key for months, and every day for weeks I would find new things missing, although petty things. Led me to go shopping for a very non-essential item at Spencer's after work one day and happened to meet my future husband. I would say he struck me as creepy at first, just because he eavesdropped on a conversation I had while checking out. Almost bought some candy, but it was a ridiculous price when I knew I could get the same thing at Target across the street for $1. Either way, unbeknownst to me, he bought the candy and followed my car to the next store. I had a weird feeling of being followed, and when I turned around, he was sprinting behind me with a candy I didn't want to pay for at the other store. All in all, a rare circumstance of this actually being a very kind and caring individual. We ended up talking for like 2 hours in the parking lot where it was mostly me venting about my life. Pretty much hit it off right away. Talked about prospects of kids and marriage, and 5 years later, we're married and have a kid together. Just want to stress again, this is rare. If someone strikes you as creepy, it's usually a sign to take seriously. I just happened to get extremely lucky, and he was just an innocent, kind person that wanted his lifetime person, and family of his own as much as I did. That was a dangerous gamble. Story 22. The most memorable were sending I love you the day we became a thing. Pressured me into having my first kiss with him, told me his pastor said I would be the one he married. After the breakup, I thought we could still be friends. Wrong. He liked making me feel like crap for moving on from him. Took me to his junior prom and tried to kiss me after when I just wanted to get in the car to go home. Got jealous of a guy friend that came to see me graduate from high school because he was the main person I wanted to talk to. Hadn't seen the kid in literal years. Every gift, favor, what have you always felt like there was an intention to try to win me back. Nothing felt genuine. Even kept trying once when I went to college. The last time being when he came to see and gave me a book for my birthday, and got pouty when I told him I was seeing someone. There's a lot more, but suffice to say, I kept giving him chances because I thought he would get over me and we could be actual friends. Instead, I ended up traumatized and emotionally scarred. And despite the fact that I now live across the country, I still worry that he'll somehow pop up out of nowhere or try to get back into my life somehow. Story 23. Only one time had it paid off. He seemed a bit creepy in that he wasn't picking up social cues, but when I was more explicit, he was thankful for clear communication rather than upset at me exerting a boundary. Turns out he's autistic. We ended up actually good friends for a bit, over a year, and I spent a couple months trying to ask him out until I eventually spelled out, if you would be interested in a romantic relationship, I would enjoy that. We've been together for 5 years. I think the difference there is that while he didn't notice some social cues and can be a bit odd, he was very careful not to violate or push boundaries. Also, he was genuinely delighted to be friends rather than treating it as a stepping stone to a relationship. He still has several close female friends. What'd I tell you, guys? What'd I tell you? Just spell it out because some people are in the spectrum and you don't know. Story 24. Emotionally mistreated me for 1.5 years in a severely toxic relationship I still am struggling to recover from. He told me if I didn't go out with him, he would end himself. I was only 14 and he was 17, soon to be 18. He forced me into a first kiss I didn't want to give that way. I didn't want him to end himself because of me. He even tried to lock me in by trying to marry me while I was 16, but thank God my parents said heck no. But then he accused me of cheating. Said I wanted to break up then because I'm completely against cheating. He knew that. He knew I hated people who cheated. He told me he would end himself if I broke up with him and hung up the phone. I told him, good, don't mess up. He stalked me for years up until I graduated high school. I got a gun first chance I was allowed to get licensed, and he finally left me alone when he saw me carrying. He's married to some girl now and seemingly happy while I still suffer from trauma. The last message he sent me was a few months after I got married. It said, hope you're as happy as I am now. Good, don't mess up is such a good line. Story 25. Dated one for a year and a half in college. I was young and naive. Red flags before we dated included very innocuous things, like wearing intentionally mismatching shoes for attention and snapping at anyone who asked about it and just kind of being rude and unpleasant. Red flags after we dated that I somehow managed to ignore. He was into hardcore corn. He was constantly rude to his mother, who was a perfectly nice woman, and once threw his phone in a fit of rage because he didn't like that she suggested he get tutoring because he was failing a class. He was really into My Little Pony, which isn't a red flag in and of itself, but the way he was into Twilight Sparkle sure was. He had serious anger issues and was mean to our friends. I was told by them after we broke up that he was awful to them whenever I was in the room, and as soon as I walked in, he immediately toned down his schmuckery. I ended up dumping him, not without a lot of tears and anguish because I did love him, to date someone significantly more well-adjusted, so glad I did. Story 26. I don't give out my phone numbers to dudes I'm not interested in. I used to, though. Guys would ask for my number and I'd be completely upfront with them. I'm not interested in pursuing anything with any guys at this time, or something like that. The guys would insist they only want to be friends. It's not like that. They're not like that, etc. So I'd give them the benefit of the doubt. Inevitably, after talking for a bit, they would try to push me into accepting a date or start flirting with me. And they would also inevitably get mad when I shot them down and pointed out that I told them this would happen from the beginning. Happened about 3 times, I think, before I just swore off it. I've since learned not to trust any dudes who keep insisting after the initial no for anything. They never think I really mean what I say, but I promise I do, and their attempts to convince me otherwise are just so transparently pathetic. You can tell when someone's awkward and when someone's just straight up slimy. And those guys were slimy. Story 27. He bought me a book and had it waiting for me at the local bookstore before our date. I thought this was rather charming. I love reading and was kind of blown away that a guy would buy me a book for a date. Okay, so yeah, the book was about how water has feelings. I'm open-minded, so we met at the restaurant and he apparently has half an apartment in his car, but okay. So during dinner, we have some small talk, chit-chat sort stuff. Then he whips out a photo of his mother, who is decked out in a huge gown laying in a chaise, and proceeds to tell me how he's living between his home in New York City and his home in a very posh town in Virginia. The mom photo is from the penthouse in New York City. He then tells me he loves me and he would like to marry me. First date. Then he says it's okay if I want to cheat on him so long as I don't rub his nose in it. Okay, so now I try to end the date as soon as possible and make sure he doesn't follow me home. Thank goodness I'm the kind to marry for love and not money. Though he claimed to be the heir to a tugboat fortune, which is just too strange to have made up. Story 28. First time I had him over and I fell asleep, I woke up with him getting under. I played it off, sent him home, told him I wasn't interested, and went a few months without talking. He messaged me again, and for whatever reason, I gave him another chance. We dated on and off for a couple years, and it was bad. He was so clueless about how his actions affected others. He told me I couldn't get mad about things he would do. He told me it was disgusting and I should be grateful he would give and make no attempt at getting me despite lots of feedback, which he would get upset about being judged. He applied for a job out of state and expected I would just come with him if he got it without talking to me. He complained about money all the time and how he doesn't make enough, but he made as much of me with far lower living expenses. He canceled trips with me so he could go on trips with his friends. After the breakup, he sent me images and offered to have intimacy with me. Some of this while he knew I was dating someone. I cannot figure out why I dated him. You maybe had low self-esteem back then? Story 29. Midway through the day where nothing had happened at all, we were walking from dinner to a nearby all-ages bar and he pushed me into a darkened section between buildings. Not quite an alley. Smashed his mouth hard against mine and grabbed my bum, both really hurt, and then said he knew I wanted him because I was always smiling at him. I tried to push him away and I finally got him off me, he just couldn't understand. Got super angry. Yelled so damn loud at me about how I'm a witch and a tease and not worth the oxygen I breathe, and I swear I could see violence in his eyes. I saw him twice a week for the next few months, and every time my heart stopped and I gave him a wide berth. It took me a long time to stop being scared of what he might do, even after I stopped seeing him around campus. It went 0 to 600 so fast and was so intense all of a sudden. I realized I didn't have any sense what he was capable of. He bruised me visibly in both bum and mouth in just that 30 to 40 seconds and didn't even seem to understand that it hurt me. What would he do if he decided I deserved it? I'm thankful I don't have to know because he didn't go that far, but damn, it was scary. Especially for a naive teenager who was totally unprepared. It took me about a year before I was ready to think about dating again. Story 30. The creep was really good looking and I didn't know he was a creep at first. There was a story, we worked together, but I stupidly chose to believe the girl was exaggerating. I was also on the rebound. Turned out badly. He had some serious, and I mean serious psychological issues. There were points where I actually feared what could happen, but he was very charming, so I questioned myself. I was very paranoid and often thought I was lying to him and had crushes on other guys, etc. He would yell at me over nothing in the parking lot, and I even was asked by a coworker who saw us what I did to make him so mad. He would take me to these secluded places where we were completely alone. It was scary. It never hurt me, but the emotional toll. Yeah, gaslighting, all of it. Anyway, long story short, I thank God we stopped talking, and I'll never do that again. I literally dodged a bullet. The only thing I learned was to have empathy for those in cruel relationships. It never hit me, like I said, but he was very emotionally cruel and just stayed in it for like 9 months. Story 31. Day was okay. It was a double day with a friend of mine and a friend of his. I only agreed because my friend really wanted to go out but didn't want to be alone. Things got very uncomfortable fast after words wouldn't leave me alone. I was in high school and I knew his ex-girlfriend who had a rough relationship with him and how he threatened to end himself if she broke up with him. I was 18 when the date happened. Fast forward a few months and I moved out of state to attend school. He somewhat found out I was going to school near where he happened to be at school and kept texting me and wouldn't leave me alone, again. But then somehow found out what my school schedule was and decided to pick me up and take me to lunch between classes. After lunch, he insisted on going back to his apartment since I had lots of time to spend, where we sat in the dark watching something on TV. I sat way on the other side of the couch, but he kept getting closer and closer anyway. Luckily, nothing happened. I somehow convinced him to take me back to school and I never spoke with him again. I had zero good vibes from him. Ever. Story 32. I was the creepy guy. Didn't date anyone until my mid-20s. Very introverted and isolated. This led to some very unrealistic and nice guy attitudes toward women. Met my first girlfriend. Dated for a few months. And when we broke up, I did not take it very well. In hindsight, my behavior was mistreatment. It took me a long time to get past it and realize the effect my actions had on her. Well, not an excuse. Much of it stemmed from undiagnosed mental health issues. Fortunately, I managed to sort myself out, got in shape, got a financially good career, eventually becoming the guy my younger self would have hated, and holy heck was the feeling reciprocated. Don't ever date the creep. He may be harmless and eventually become a decent person, but he needs to do that himself. It's not worth the risk to hope he will change while you're with him, and it's not your responsibility. Yep, that's right. They will learn through experience. Story 33. I gave him over 5 chances. I don't know why. I was naive, young, and craved attention. I turned him down constantly, but continued to be his friend and let him be my friend. He kept trying to get with me, and one day I just snapped. I turned him down hard and said I would never be interested. He got controlling over me at some point, and he was angry that I had the gall to turn him down, and then he began threatening to spread fake rumors about me. Things like I was cheating on my boyfriend with him, or how he wanted to take some edited selfies of mine and print them out and put them all around the school. I sent him those pics as a joke. Teens being teens and drawing stuff on things. Except he screenshot and saved any picture I'd send him that had me in it. I kept all selfies of me on his phone and refused to delete them even when I asked several times. Eventually, he switched schools, stopped talking to me, but a couple of months later, I kept seeing a guy that looked exactly like him walk by my house almost every day, for a month after school during the fall. I haven't heard from him or seen him since fall of 2021. Story 34. I was labeled a creep in my school days, as I was quite different from other people and had major confidence problems related to physical and emotional cruelty I was going through, and an incident in 8th grade where a cheerleader pretended to like me for a week, as a joke. But I would never have done any of the things that so many are posting on here. The very few relationships I had in my teens and 20s ended amicably, and I didn't stalk any of them. In fact, I'd say I'm still friendly with the 2 women I dated seriously in high school and college. I wasn't innocent in the matter. I had a drive that was like an unstoppable hunger, and I did do some skirt looking in junior high. Short skirts were in fashion in the mid-'80s, but I wasn't nearly as bad as the guys described here. Yet I still got lumped in with him, and it, among other factors, destroyed my confidence in my future. I'm still single at 50 and haven't had a date in over 13 years. I make a decent wage, enough to live on my own and pay for good computer gear, and my car is paid for. I still think I could have made a pretty good husband, but apparently nobody else thought so. Be careful how you label people. They can do more damage than you think. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.